Okay, let's get started. Hello, and welcome to Just One More Thing, a podcast about knitting and crafting. I'm your host, Janessa. And of course, right as I decide that, yes, let's start recording, the neighbor starts mowing his lawn. Hopefully, it's not too much of a distraction. I can't imagine that it's any louder than like when my air conditioning is running, which it isn't today because it's really nice outside. We have nice weather today here in Missouri. Um, I'll get into that more later. You don't need to hear about the weather. You're here for the knitting. It's been 2 weeks since I last saw you, friends. And I got a lot done in those 2 weeks. It's kind of funny how it just like keeps piling up. And I was like, wow, I'm gonna have so much to talk about on the podcast today. It is Wednesday, which is a day later than what my normal schedule will be. But after today, we are back to normal schedules. Yay! Because the kids went back to school this morning. Mom is happy. I love my kids. I love that they get to be home, that we don't have to like do the babysitter thing in the summer. That's really super great. But we're clashing personalities, my kids and I. And their personalities clash with each other like many siblings do. And I'm just really glad to have some peace and quiet during the day. And they need some time away from each other so that they can learn to appreciate each other when they're around. They've had a little too much of each other this summer. So anyway, back to school day. Woohoo! Brooklyn started 5th, Emerson started 2nd. And then, you know, I started enjoying some peace and quiet today. So after this, we'll be back to recording on Tuesdays, and they'll be up like, you know, sometime on Tuesday, probably in the evening. And that'll last throughout the school year for the most part. I can't imagine it deviating too much. But thank you for, you know, letting me off the hook last week. And it was kind of nice to wind down the summer. And like I said, I got a lot of knitting done. So let's jump into finished objects. Do you see my Free Your Fade? It is complete and it's huge. Huge. Maybe you saw a picture of it on Instagram, all spread out on my washing line drawing. Oh, look at that. Look how it's just, you can see me through that green. It's so thin. Okay, so let's talk Free Your Fade. This is a pattern by Andrea Mowry, and she's the one who does all the fading patterns that are really popular right now. There was the Find Your Fade, the Free Your Fade, the So Faded, which is a sweater. She is getting ready to start a What the Fade mystery knit along, which I'm still kind of tempted to join in, even though I don't know how to brioche and I don't have yarn for it. Still tempted. So this one was Free Your Fade. It's an asymmetrical triangular shawl where this was the cast on, and then you knit forever and keep knitting, and then you bind off on the widest part of the triangle. So it ends up being triangular like that. So it's kind of on the bias a little bit. This was some of my hand spun yarn, which you may remember from like way, I don't know, maybe episode 3 or 4 is when I talked about this spinning project. It was some batlings from Textiles Amano in the Tide Pool colorway. And I basically pulled all of the colors apart and spun them separately. But as I pulled each bat apart, little bits of the color next to it would show up. So in my yarn, which I left as a single, I would get these kind of colors from the next section. So I thought, well, that would make a really cool fading effect, because even after you're out of your faded section, you're still going to get little bits of the other colors. That showed up quite a bit in the turquoise. There were some, you know, definite spots in the green. Didn't show up so much in the pink. So as I was knitting along, the single that I had of the maroon was like 300 yards. And they were all about an ounce each-ish. This one, the turquoise, ended up being like 302-ish yards, or maybe it was 312. It was pretty close. Like, these two were pretty close, and you can definitely tell that, like, weight-wise, they were pretty close. By the time I had got to the green, I was spinning quite a bit thinner, I think, because this section ended up being like 350 yards for the ounce. So you can tell how much thinner that knitting is from this knitting or this knitting. They're all still pretty thin, but this one was quite a bit thinner. The pink was nearly 500 yards. Yeah, you heard that right. So when I got to the pink, not only was I like really tired of knitting this shawl, like I was done knitting the shawl, the yarn was really thin as well. So I made a decision to, and it wasn't my favorite color of the group, so I made the decision, because I can, to hold the pink double, and that's why the pink looks so much thicker. You can't hardly see me through it, and it's much smaller than the other sections. Like, that's a pretty decent sized green section, pretty decent sized turquoise section. The pink section would have been, you know, even though you're working on all of those stitches, it ends up being a lot. I also did a picot bind off, because I like a picot bind off. So yeah, I was really happy with how it turned out. It's gonna get a lot of wear because it's so thin, even though it's big. It's just one of those really fun ones to, you know, wrap around and do like a big kind of, you know, scarf under a jacket or something like that, or over a t-shirt or whatever. It's not too hot. Like, it's really light and airy, so you can kind of get away with wearing it year-round, maybe. I don't know about maybe like in the air conditioning year-round. I don't know about outside year-round. Anyway, that was my free year fade. And then let's talk about another one that you have seen on the needles that has finished. Then we're going to get on to some things that you've never seen before. The Glamour wrap is also done. Ends are woven in, but it's not blocked, so I haven't clipped the ends. So they're kind of poking out a little bit. But here we go with the Glamour wrap. Big, nice shawl. With the lace is accomplished through drop stitches. So this one is more of like a wrap around your shoulders, kind of like a blanket. There we go. So that's like that. Works more as like a large scarf or a stole. This one was fairly easy to knit. I used, it's for my prayer shawl group. So I used Loops and Threads, which I think is a Michael's craft store brand of yarn, in one of their ombre colorways. I think it was called like Seaside or something like that. I could tell you exactly how many yards it ended up being. I used all of 3 skeins and just like basically that last garter ridge before the bind off, like that was skein number 4 is where I added the 4th skein. I was going to make it even longer, but I was racing to finish this because of Stash Dash. That's why I have so many finished things. And quite honestly, I can't remember if I've said that yet already, so I'm going to say it again, and then I'll edit it out if that's the case. So Stash Dash is a contest that is put on by Leslie and Laura of the Knit Girls podcast. Laura, who's a teacher, a librarian, has the summer off, and so she likes to challenge herself in the summer to like basically see how much she can knit out of her stash and like reduce that amount of stash that she has for, and it's kind of a make along because it encompasses spinning and knitting and weaving and crocheting and all kinds of different crafts. So their top category that you can enter for this make along, let's call it, is 15K, so 15,000 meters. And I kind of started out saying I'm going to participate in this and maybe I'll get to 10K. When I surpassed that, I was like, it'd be really fun to get to 15. I thought I was there 3 days before the deadline. I was like, yes, I've made it to 15K. Made my post, put it in the 15K group, went back through and just made sure I had my math right. I figured, you know, sometimes you might be like a number or 2 off. I don't know where I must have added something twice. I was 1,000 off. I was at 14K. I was like, oh, I'm about to die. I was like, how could I be that off? I ran the numbers. I kid you not, like 10 times that night, being like, I must have forgotten something. I added something and must not have posted it. Like, I went back through my project pages. I went through back all my spring. I was like, where did I miss? Oh my goodness. So I very quickly decided I was going to finish this because I was going to make it even longer. I was going to do like 5 whole skeins and make it like a super long wrap. But I basically like finished this off and spun another like 4 ounces like pretty quickly so that I could get back to 15K. And I did it. I made it to 15K, but that's basically like I really rushed to get this done. So when you put your mind to it, this one knits up really, really fast. So let's talk about some of the other projects I finished in order to get to that 15K. That was the Glamour wrap. Then my mom had asked if I would make a stuffy for a friend. I think I talked about this when I came back from Colorado. Picked up some yarn from Hobby Lobby so that I could knit a sloth. A little 3-toed sloth. For this friend of my mom's who's having a baby, and he's not like my best stuffy ever. Like, he kind of looks a little, I don't know. I sewed on all the appendages. I basically followed the pattern. I kind of feel like maybe he would have come together better if I'd have picked up stitches and knit the arms and legs out, and maybe like knit the head and the body as one instead of separate. I don't know. He looks a little like his arms won't lay down flat, or maybe I overstuffed him a little bit. Maybe that's the problem. But as he gets used, the stuffing will take better shape. Anyway, this is a 3-toed sloth. I did make a couple of pattern adjustments. I embroidered toes on his feet. I probably should have done the I-cord toes and sewn them on, but I don't know. I was in a rush, so I just embroidered the toes on. I probably could have found better safety eyes, like the ones that actually look like eyes instead of just the little beads, but there you go. Otherwise, I'm pretty happy with them. I feel like he needs a hat or something, like feel like he doesn't look finished. The pattern also has you knit him like a little poncho, but I don't get the poncho thing for it, so I don't know. I made the little sloth. I feel like I did a pretty decent job embroidering his mouth and his nose on. I was happy with that. That doesn't always come out good. And I managed to do intarsia on the eyes. I was really happy with how that turned out too. So anyway, that was my little three-toed sloth. And you're going to see this yarn again in a second for another project that I'm working on to accompany him. So once I had him done, I thought I was within like 150 meters or so of being done for Stash Dash. So I was like, well, I'm just going to work up something super quick. And I made this cowl. Just kind of a nice, simple, like, it's not one that you can, well, I don't know, you probably could twist it around and make it super tight, but it's just kind of like a loose cowl with a decorative cable that you can't really see because of the busy yarn. Here you can kind of see it. Basically just kind of a cable detail there. And I basically, there was a pattern called Lato. It's a hat pattern. I'll try to link to it if I remember. That it was basically a hat that had that cable on the side. So like imagine a hat, which is that fun cable up the side. I decided that it would be pretty as a cowl. So this yarn is also some of my hand spun that has been sitting in my stash for ages because I didn't know what to make with it. There's a bit of the yarn. So it was a pretty chunky yarn, a merino, and it's kind of striped with that black, it's kind of a black and pink and gray. So it works up really pretty, I thought. It came out really cute. Definitely very chunky. I knit it on pretty big needles so that it wasn't, you know, standing up on its own. I wanted it to drape a little bit. So, yay. And it was basically just 100 stitches is what I cast on. And then I stole that cable stitch off of that hat. And it's like you have like 2 purl stitches, so that's 6. And then I think you work each of these over 4 stitches. So, you know, I basically just like marked off that number of stitches and worked the cable pattern, which really is not, like, you can see it in person, but it is not showing up on the camera very good. But it's basically just like all of these go this direction and all of those go that direction kind of cable. Honestly, it's more for the color, and my daughter will probably steal it because it's pink and she loves pink. So yeah, a super chunky, simple cowl made from hand spun. I feel like that's, oh, there you can kind of see the cable a little bit. There we go. You got to get it just in the right light. It's really, honestly, the yarn's too busy to make this a good, let's cable that kind of a pattern. I probably could have just knit, you know, just done a simple knit it all around cowl, or maybe put like some purl bumps in there somewhere or something, and it would have shown up a little better. But I don't know. I really wanted to cable it. And I'll probably find some more chunky yarn and do it in like a really plain yarn just to see how that turns out. But yeah, I was super happy with how that worked up. I'm determined to try and get you to see the cables, but my lighting is not cooperating today. Okay, so I showed you the shawls, I showed you the cowl, I showed you the sloth. I think that was all of the knit. Oh, no, there's one more. One more. That was all that I knit to help finish Stash Dash. After Stash Dash was complete, I knit this blanket that I'm about to show you. So here's what I'll do. I'm going to talk about the spinning I did to finish Stash Dash, and then I'll show you the blanket. We'll mix it up a little bit, make things a little different. So the long-awaited Falkland from Once Upon a Corgi in the Hedwig colorway. It is a lace. Look at my dirty fingernail. It's a lace. Very, very thin, very fine. So soft and squishy. For as much as a lace can be woolen spun, this is woolen spun. I plied it very loosely. I don't know if you're going to be able to tell. Focus. Maybe up there. How loosely I plied it. But I pretty much plied it as loose as I could and still have it hold together. And I wonder. We're going to pull this down for a second because I want to talk about it. So it ended up being around 1,300 or 1,400 yards of lace weight. Ended up pretty close to, this was the Reinerdine I did a while back. Ended up being pretty close in weight and yardage. I want to knit them together. So that was the Falkland from Once Upon a Corgi in the Hedwig colorway. And then, like I said, I was 1,000 meters short of my goal. So I basically, like, super quick grabbed some fiber that I had sitting on the shelf and spun it up. And it was fiber that I bought from Knit Picks. It was when they had their full circle yarn. They also had full circle fiber, which I believe was like a recycled type of wool. I'm not entirely sure how that worked. It was a roving. I spun it and left it as a single because I didn't have time to ply it. I was on the deadline, but I spun it pretty thick. Let's see there. Left it as a single. So I kind of, now I have these three, I kind of want to find some other colors in this family, like try to find something that's a little more towards the gray and work my way from like this brown through that speckled into this gray. And maybe I'll use these for the What the Fade. I might like have to hold these double. I don't know. What do you think? Do a hand spun What the Fade? It's tempting. It's really tempting. I'm gonna go stash diving through my fiber stash and see if I can find some colors that will, because I think you need 6 altogether. So maybe like a color that works between this really dark brown and this, and then maybe something that's a little more towards the gray. I don't know. We're gonna see what we can find. That's kind of a maybe plan that I have in mind. Well, I don't know. The full circle ended up being I'm gonna get it wrong. I want to say it was about 500 yards. I'm gonna have to go back and look it up. I'll put it I'll write it on the screen and tell you what it actually was. But I was happy with it. It worked up a little bit better than I thought it would. I honestly didn't know what to expect with that fiber, but overall I think it worked out. So that was the spinning. I finished 2 skeins of spinning in 2 weeks. Not bad. Back to knitting. This one is also done but not blocked, so there are lots of ends peeking in on the back. This is a baby blanket, the chevron baby blanket. That I basically kind of used a lot of scraps for. So let me show you what I did. Let me find them. So this color, which you will recognize from the Glamour wrap, I had basically 2 skeins of this left, but it wasn't going to be enough to make an entire baby blanket. I also had a full skein of this color, which is the same yarn. It's the same Leaves and Threads, ombre, however you pronounce it, just in a different colorway. So I had a full skein of that, and I started thinking, well, maybe 3 skeins will be enough to work up a baby blanket. So I cast on, and I started working, and I was doing like 6 rows of this, and then 2 rows of that, like working back and forth. And so that's kind of from the cast on to about here. So like those 3 repeats, let's say, I did that combo. Then I decided, well, I'm working through the yarn a little faster than I'd like, so maybe I'll add in a 3rd color. I had this very turquoisey, just a solid yarn. I think I got it at like Walmart. It was in their craft section. They were like tiny little skeins for like 50 cents or something like that, that I had bought for Brooklyn to use in a lot of her crafting projects, and she ended up not liking that yarn very much, so I took it. So I started working in that every so often. And then after a while, I decided to just do like I would switch every 3 colors, like, and do basically stripes like that. So I kept doing that for a while until I ran out of the turquoise. And then I started working in this, where did it go? Green color. So that's this kind of greenish, yellowish color. And honestly, like, when I held them together, I thought they worked pretty well. Like, it kind of picked up this tone of the green in that yarn. So, that's why this top part is more green, and the middle part's a little more turquoise, and then the bottom part's a little more like on the light side. It's kind of a faded chevron. I did not plan it that way. It's just, I was looking to use up scraps, and that's how it worked out. So, scrappy chevron baby blanket complete. I kind of like how it looks. It's a little, I don't know, with the striping of these two, like, you get you don't get like super stripes, you just kind of get blocks of color and pops of color. So I thought it worked out well. So that's the chevron baby blanket. But the yarn stuck to it. I found this pattern on Ravelry, but it was Espace Tricot up in Canada, in Montreal. their blog, they have quite a few free patterns on their blog. And this was one of them. So it's, and since it's free, I'll link to it, but it's basically like 121 stitches across. And then, it's, you know, your basic chevron patterning where you're doing, a yarn over knit one yarn over in the valley, and at the peak you're doing, basically like a slip two knit one past the slipped over, like basically a 2-stitch decrease there. And that's how you get the chevron. So that is what I have finished knitting. We are past the finished object portion of today's show, and I'm not done yet because there is more to share. That's just what I finished. I told you it was a lot of stuff in 2 weeks that got done. We got stuff done this last couple of weeks. And the weather's starting to cool off, which means I'm like, knit, all the things. Must knit more things. And that brings me to what is actually on my needles. So 2 things to share with you in that direction. In that topic. Let's call it a topic. The first is I finally worked out all my math. All of my scribbling and math for my mom's vest, in the what I'm calling my mom's buffalo vest. So I showed you guys the yarn a while back. Make sure I'm not losing any stitches off my needles here. This was the buffalo yarn that I spun. And I had started knitting it and realized, oh, that gauge is just way off. I need to rethink that. So I redid my math and did hear back from Hohi on the message boards on Ravelry. Unfortunately, that's such an old pattern, and it wasn't a measurement she thought to take at the time, so she just didn't have the information to share. So I was like, well, I'm going to wing it, and I'll let you know how it works out in case anyone else ever asks. So here's the new knitting. And if you take this from like the back down to the like mid back to hip, like that's still a pretty long piece of knitting. So I think it's going to work out. I went down to like 90 stitches for my cast on, I think. And then just basically shortened. There's a section of just plain stockinette, and this is where most of the short row shaping takes place, so I shortened that just a little bit. I left the cable number as was. I shortened up this garter ridge section. There's like this little twisted stitch section that I left as was, and then a double seed stitch section is where I shortened. So those 3 big sections is where I took cast on numbers off, and like all the little sections in between I left as were, as written. So I haven't gotten too far in it yet. It's very small still. I basically just knit enough to see like how long it was going to be, and I need to start doing like short row shaping on it. But this is going to be kind of my main project for the next couple of weeks. I want to have this done for Mom by Christmas, so I'm kind of putting a deadline on it so I don't put off knitting on it. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully I end up having enough yarn and I don't have to be like, rework it. I don't want to have to rip it out and rework it again. And I think that's the main reason I haven't knit too much on it, is because I'm still trying to like psych myself into the fact that yes, it's gonna work. Like, you're gonna have enough yarn. It'll all work out. I don't trust that it will, but crossing my fingers, I hope that works out. So hopefully you'll be seeing a lot more of that. The pattern I'm using is a Joji Locatelli pattern called Meridian, and it's meant to be like a full sleeve cardigan, but I'm basically knitting it without sleeves, and it'll be a vest that my mom wants to wear. So hopefully that works out. That's like the main thing that's on my needles right now. I also, do you remember a while back, I knit a shawl called Makariri from Aroha Knits, and every time I talked about it, I said, geez, I really hope I'm pronouncing that right. I don't know if I am still or not. The designer for that, I think her name is Frenchie, or Francoise, or I don't know. She has, I think she goes by Frenchie is the name she goes by, and I'm really not sure what her Ravelry name is. But she's a designer that is very much about like helping other people become designers, and she kind of teaches classes on how to design. And she, in her newsletter that she sent out, and then like in her Ravelry group, and she has a Facebook group, she's doing a 5-day challenge. That's basically swatching for 5 completely different shawl types. And I'm blanking on the name of the challenge, so I'm going to put it up right here. And it's like you get an email a day, and it gives you a little background on the type of shawl or knitting that you're going to be doing. And then you basically knit like a mini shawl, and it's a swatch for how to construct that type of knitting. She did come across a couple of problems in the patterns that she decided to kind of like put a pause on it, and it was going to be like this whole week starting, you know, Monday through Friday, but she decided like, I'm putting the brakes on it. I need to go back and rework this stuff so that we get all the kinks out, and we'll start again next Monday. So if this sounds like something that you might want to get in on, follow the link in my show notes and go join in. It's free. You get an email a day, and it's basically just like a mini pattern. And then if that's the kind of shawl that you think you would like want to continue working on, you can make it bigger. You can get yarn and go full shawl with it. But this way it just gives you like 5 little mini examples of different shawl constructions. Plus the background and like extra reading that you can go look into if you want to learn more about it. So for day 1, it was Shetland knitting. So like think of all the Shetland lace that you hear about. I'm in the middle of working that swatch. So this was one where you cast on using like a garter tab, and then you increase the body, and then you're knitting on and edging. So that's the point that I'm at now. This semicircle here would be, sorry, this is bugging me, and I'm working on tiny needles so they're not standing up the way I want. So that little semicircle would be the body of your shawl. It would lay like this, and then you're knitting on, no, it would lay like this, and then you're knitting on and edging. So like these stitches, you know, would come together, and you'd have that lace edging on your shawl. It'll look better when I get it off the needles and can like properly show it to you. Maybe I'll throw up a picture. I don't know. If I get it done today, I'll like put in a little picture here that's like, look, it got done. If not, you'll see it next week. I'm totally including these in my finished objects next week when I get them done. I finished 3 mini shawls. One person in the Facebook group I saw, she posted her finished pictures, like styled it on her daughter's Barbie, because it was like, it's basically like a doll's eye shawl. So yeah. Anyway, I'm working on that, and it's just kind of fun to see how the different ones come together. There's also, day 2 was Estonia, and then she put a pause on it because there were problems in both of those patterns, and so she wanted to fix it and make it, and they weren't problems. It was more, I think, making the patterns more clear, and tech editing and stuff like that. So she's working on fixing those and is going to start that again next week. If you're interested, I'll leave a link in the show notes so that you can also sign up and, you know, join in on the fun shawl knitting. Just a quick 5-day little challenge for yourself. It's also kind of a neat way to learn a new technique that you may not be familiar with without having to knit the entire shawl or the entire piece of, you know, whatever it is that you're wanting to knit. You know, if you're only knitting something that's like this big, you're gonna know, like, yeah, that's not for me. And you can move on to something else that you do enjoy knitting. But then you also are going to be left with like swatches that you're not going to be sure what to do with. So these will totally end up in my kids' toy box when I'm done with them. But anyway, so that is what is on the needles as of right now. I also told you I was going to be knitting something, a companion piece for this gift. And that is basically, this is the yarn. Oops. That I have left over from knitting the sloth. And with those 3 skeins, oops, I'm going to knit another one of these. So I'll just do, it'll just be stripes, little tiny stripes of those 3 colors. Works for however long the yarn lasts. And it'll be a tiny little baby blanket to go along with the 3-toed sloth so that they'll match. So that's also a project that I plan to cast on this week. But the priority knitting is going to be Mom's cardigan, shawl, vest, whatever we're calling it, so that we can get that done and to her by Christmas. And kind of my goal is to get her vest done and the baby blanket done so that I can send like one big package to her. Like, just send it all at once. So that's kind of my goal. She'll probably, I'll just have to tell her, like, wrap this up and put it under your tree. You're getting it well before Christmas, but that's just how it goes. I don't like going to the post office unless I absolutely have to. So that's kind of all that I've been working on crafty wise. Adventure family wise, like I said, the kids went back to school today. Yay! On Monday, much like everyone else, we enjoyed the solar eclipse, the great American solar eclipse. We were very lucky in that we didn't have to travel far to get to the totality band of where it went through Missouri. So we went down to a national wildlife refuge called Swan Lake. That's like, I don't know, 15 miles south of us or so. Because it's a really wide open, very rural area. And we did not want to have to deal with crowds. We didn't want to have to go down to the city and deal with traffic. We had friends that a normal like 2-hour drive took them like 4 hours to get home. Like it doubled the time to get home just because of traffic and like standstill traffic. Not just heavy traffic, but like standstill traffic. And we did not want to mess with that. Not when we had a lot of other stuff to do that day as well. It was back to school night that night, so we didn't want to have to deal with a lot of crowds. It was something that we wanted to do on our own. So we were looking at the weather the day before, and I was like, it's going to be cloudy. This is going to really stink. Like, I guess we'll still be able to see like totality and stuff, but we're not going to be able to actually look at the sun with our solar eclipse glasses and see all the different phases. Like, that's really going to stink. I was hoping the kids would be able to see that. And Ben was like, well, maybe it'll clear up. Maybe it's Missouri. You never know. Weather changes. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I was kind of pessimistic about it for good reason. So the day came. We went down there. It started to rain. And not just like sprinkle. It poured rain. And it was dark and it was cloudy. And I was like, this is going to be the worst eclipse ever. Sorry, that kind of blew out your headphones if you're listening on your headphones. It was going to be the worst eclipse ever. I was upset by the weather, but what can you do? It's Mother Nature, and we weren't going to drive looking for clear sky. Like, that wasn't going to be in the cards. So we decided just to make the most of it. We looked in like the visitor center and kind of played around in there. There was a little bit of break in the weather, so we drove out kind of around through the refuge area, kind of scouting out spots to stop and actually watch the eclipse. And then it started to rain again. I was like, great, it's going to rain this whole time. We're going to be stuck in the truck the entire time, and we're not going to be able to even go outside. I was kind of grumpy. But I was trying to keep it to myself because I didn't want my bad mood to rub off on the kids. And finally, it kind of let up a little bit. Like, it was still sprinkling, but it was a sprinkle. It wasn't a downpour. So we had stopped at this overflow area where there were some kind of grates that went out kind of over this little pond. And we were watching the fish jump. The kids loved that. Like, you could really, like, jumping up out of the water, like watching fish. So that was entertaining for them. It was a nice spot to stand on because it was like a grate. So we weren't standing in the mud or in the wet grass or trying to like there were lots of cars. The traffic was, even for that rural area, like there wasn't a crowd, but there was a lot of people there trying to find spots to watch it. So there were cars going by and it's a narrow road. I'm like, I'm really glad we're not standing in the road, like trying to keep our kids from getting hit by a car. It was just a really perfect spot to like stand off to the side and enjoy what there was going to be to enjoy the eclipse. A really nice couple from Minnesota pulled up behind us and they got out and they're like, can we watch the eclipse with you? It would be fun to watch it with kids. And I said, yeah, absolutely. And they were an older couple. And they were super, super nice. And so they kind of stood there and we chit-chatted and we told, we were local. So we kind of gave them all the info they needed to know about like what was going, where they were and what the refuge was like and animals and stuff. There was a bald eagle that we got to see. It was flying around us hunting. It was an immature bald eagle, so it was all brown, but it was it's still an impressive bird to watch. Lots of wildlife out and around, lots of birds and stuff there. So that was fun. Like, animal watching was fun. We chatted with them and we could kind of tell like things were slowly getting darker and darker, but we still could not see the sun at all. We were counting down, we were looking at our clocks, counting down the time, and it got to be, there was a sign at the visitor center when we pulled in that said, you're going to experience 1 minute, 26 seconds of, totality at 1:10 p.m. Central time. So our time. And so like at 1:10, boom, like that, it went just night. It was dark. The animals got all quiet. The frogs started croaking. The crickets started chirping. It was nighttime, and it was, even though it was cloudy, all along the horizon, we could see that 360-degree sunset that they talk about during the totality. We could not see the corona at all. It was too cloudy for that. But everything just got still and quiet. And it was just like, oh. And we were all in awe. We were just all in awe. It started, we could tell when it had lifted, it started getting light again. And that was when the clouds cleared. Seriously? You could have done it like 2 minutes before. The clouds cleared up. We were able to actually, it was still pretty overcast. So it was hard to see it like through the eclipse glasses, but we had pretty dark sunglasses on and we weren't looking like directly at it, but we could kind of like see it, a little bit. And then the clouds cleared enough that we could see it properly through our eclipse glasses. And the kids had a lot of fun. Like, we looked at it, we talked about it, we enjoyed it. It was just, it was kind of a fun day. Oh, all in all, I think it was something that the kids really, really enjoyed. And then, in 7 years, when it comes through South Missouri, we're going to be lucky enough that we're close enough to drive, to see the one in 2024 that I think it starts like in Texas and goes through the very southern part of Missouri and then like up through the northeast is where that eclipse will pass. So our once in a lifetime experience of seeing a total eclipse is going to happen again in 7 years. So yeah, we'll probably plan to do something with the kids for that because they're old enough that they can remember this happening. And then they'll definitely be like in their teenage years when that one happens. So we'll probably have to do something again in 7 years for that. That was a fun day. We came back and met the kids' teachers and dropped off all their school supplies and just got everything ready. Like, everything is finally ready for them to go back to school. Clothes are organized. The whole 9 yards. I even have, we'll see how long this lasts. Knowing me, it probably won't last long. But stranger things have happened. We got like the entire week's worth of clothes laid out so that we don't have to rush around in the morning trying to find clothes. I've got the hiccups. Trying to find clothes. Trying to find socks. It always happens like, oh, I forgot to wash this. I don't have any clean clothes to wear. Well, you gotta find something, I don't like wearing that. It itches. Well, it's the only clean thing you've got. Those fights were the bane of my existence last year. So I'm determined to try and rectify that this year. We'll see how long it happens. But for this week, at least, they have clothes laid out. They know what they're going to wear. It should be a pretty easy week because it's only 3 days. And then next week we'll start like the back to the grind, homework, reading, all that kind of good stuff that they get to do with back to school. So next week I'll have fun stories to share about my kids' experiences going back to school, and I'll have mini shawls to share and hopefully progress on the vest and maybe even some more spinning if I can find some yarn that'll work for my What the Fade plans. We'll just have to wait and see. So I will see you next week on Tuesday at our regular time here in my regular spot with lots of knitting to share. I hope you have a very happy, crafty week. If your kids are going back to school, best of luck to them. I hope they enjoy it as much as mine do. And we will talk to you soon.